For 4 grain and most of my breads, I use a KitchenAid mixer. Usually keep some pan spray around. For the 4 grain, I use Vital Wheat gluten. I use some granulated honey. For regular honey is okay. Whole wheat flour. Hard to see the extra W. I use Bulgar wheat cracked. Steel cut oats cracked. A little digital scale for small ingredients like salt and instant yeast. I use a sealable plastic container and a regular baker's scale for the regular ingredients that are heavier. I put a little bit of cornmeal on my peel, which is a masonite board, 24 inches by 18. I bake in a Wolf range. I use unglazed ceramic tiles. I use some little forms cut out of plastic PVC and cut some parchment. Those are plastic bags I use to proof in. Regular bread flour is one of the ingredients. That's the firm starter that's related to in the formula. That sits in the refrigerator overnight, and I get it at room temperature. That's the barm. And that's the sour starter that usually gets fed, fairly typical. And I scale the 2 whole grains, the wheat and the oats, into some kind of a glass container. Can be just about anything. Put about an inch over the top of the grain level, cover it up, and that sits overnight so those grains will soften up. I'll drain those the next morning so there's not quite so much moisture on them. And then here I scale off all the dry ingredients, usually the day before, while the grains are soaking and the firm starter and the barm are sitting in the refrigerator overnight. So you'll see these are the ingredients that are in the written formula. Then when I scale the salt, I keep it in a separate small container because I'll bring the dough together without the salt or the firm starter. Let it rest for 5 minutes before I add the salt and the starter for its final mixing. So I bring all of the dries and the water together, let that sit for 5 minutes, and after it's sat, I put in the firm starter and the salt. I mix it about 5 or 6 minutes total time. You'll see the consistency. It's pretty stiff. It'll pull away from the sides of the bowl. Then right as it's pretty well developed, the last minute or so I'll add the seeds and the cracked wheat that have been soaked. And that'll take approximately a minute or so, maybe a little more, to get it fully incorporated. And I just mix it in low until it becomes consistent. And then after it's fully consistent, I put it in a plastic container I'll rest for 1 hour. I'll take it back out and I'll give it a 4-fold, all the sides into the center. At rest for another hour. Stretch it a little bit as you fold. And then after the second hour, the final stretching and folding actually is more like you'll see me roll it up into kind of a roll where I'll take that to the workbench and start scaling. Occasionally, if it's pretty sticky, I'll add a little more pan spray to the base of that plastic container. I'll prepare my work surface with a fair amount of flour and the scale, and you'll see again I roll up this last roll. And there's the prepped paper-lined forms that I use. The finished loaves will go in those forms and into a plastic bag for overnight proofing in the fridge. This formula will make three loaves about 1 pound, 12 to 14 ounces each. I don't have to worry about them being too exact. So I'll ball them up and I'll give them 20 minutes under a piece of plastic just to relax them a little bit before I form them into loaves. I'll usually get rid of the excess flour on the top and flip them over. I like to get the flour off the inside. That just keeps a little more uniform interior so that it sticks fairly well as I roll it up. I form them, I just fold those two outside edges towards the center, and then with a little bit of pressure as I roll them up, I seal that last edge, and those go into the forms that you see. Then the loaves and forms go into a plastic bag. I incorporate a little air in there so it kind of gives it room to rise in the fridge. Those are in the fridge overnight. The next morning, I'll slide them out of the plastic bags onto that peel and score them. They'll usually take covered around an hour and a half to 2 hours, mostly to get back to room temperature approximately before I put them in the oven. And I'll turn the oven on about a half an hour in advance to 475. When that comes to temperature, I'll slide them in. I turn it down to about 425 and set the timer for 30 minutes. When that goes off, they're usually about just the way I want them. Obviously cool them on a wire rack, and they're pretty darn good. Hope you have the same enjoyment I've had with them. Thanks.